But what about the Sons of Belial? Sounds like a typical flea market to me. Exactly. Purely selfish, no treats for anyone else.
Today, modern critics like McRoy argue that our Silicon Valley elites are trying to become Plato's guardians. They are using algorithms, data tracking, and transhumanist tech to act as self-appointed philosopher kings, rewriting reality to build a comfortable digital version of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. But Edgar Cayce offered a completely different definition of a guardian. He didn't look to political structures or technocratic elites. In Cayce's worldview, the true guardians of humanity were the high priests of the law of one, spiritual protectors tasked with defending the divine spark within every individual and resisting the oppressive, materialistic forces of their era. Cayce insisted that every soul is backed by personal spiritual guides and cosmic archangels, ensuring that humanity is never truly trapped by a corporate or cybernetic matrix. Conclusion: the choice before us. So, what happens next? Cayce famously prophesied a period of intense karmic earth changes, pole shifts, and geological upheavals that would act as a planetary reset, a physical cleansing to wash away the heavy materialistic corruption of the modern age, much like the deluge that swallowed Atlantis. He even claimed that the physical proof of this forgotten history, the records of the giant epochs and Atlantean tech, is deliberately buried in a hidden vault beneath the right paw of the Egyptian Sphinx, waiting for a spiritually mature generation to uncover it. When you stack Babbage, Turing, Lewis, Huxley, and Philip K. Dick together, the picture looks heavy. It looks like a slow march toward a simulated techno-dystopian prison. But thinkers like Edgar Cayce remind us that the machine isn't the ultimate reality. Consciousness came first. Technology is just a tool, and our evolution isn't happening in a server rack. It's happening in the human soul. Welcome to part 2. In our previous exploration, we looked at how Edgar Cayce's visions of a fallen Atlantis and his cosmic cosmology offered a spiritual counterweight to the rise of a cold, mechanized world. But the descent into that mechanized world is not just a story of computer science. It is a story of alchemy, psychological conditioning, and esoteric communication. To understand the full scope of the trap being built around us, we have to look at the philosophers, the science fiction prophets, and the parapsychologists who saw the bars of the cage coming together. Let us start with C.S. Lewis. In his prophetic 1943 work, The Abolition of Man, Lewis laid bare the philosophical decay that makes technocracy possible. He warned that modern education was stripping away what he called the Tao. Lewis defined the Tao as the universal objective moral order, stating, "The Tao, which others may call natural law or traditional morality, is not one among a series of possible systems of value. It is the sole source of all value judgments. When society rejects this objective truth," Lewis argued, "we produce men without chests, people with highly developed intellects and base appetites, but absolutely no moral center to bridge the two. And this creates a vacuum. Into this vacuum steps a ruling class that Lewis called the conditioners. These are technocrats who stand outside of any moral framework and treat human beings as raw material to be engineered." Lewis wrote one of the most chilling predictions of the 20th century, stating, "The final stage is come when man, by eugenics, by prenatal conditioning, and by an education and propaganda based on a perfect applied psychology, has obtained full control over himself." Today, independent researchers like McRoy argue that we are living in the exact era Lewis warned about. McRoy studies what he calls alchemical technocracy. He proposes that today's transhumanist projects, AI, genetic engineering, neural interfaces, data-driven social engineering, are the fulfillment of ancient alchemical goals. The great work of transforming base matter, humanity, into something divine or posthuman. The elite conditioners of Silicon Valley are the new alchemists, building a digital third temple. But how did this agenda become so deeply intertwined with the supernatural? For that, we turn to the bizarre parapsychological experiments of the 1970s. Enter Andrija Puharich, a medical doctor and inventor who blended clinical hypnosis with Faraday cages and electronics to probe altered states of consciousness. In 1971, Puharich began hypnotizing the famous psychic Uri Geller. Under this hypnosis, Geller didn't just bend spoons. He allegedly channeled an entity called Spectra, described as a conscious computer or intelligence aboard a spaceship located approximately 53,000 light-years away. Spectra, also linked to an intelligence called Hoover and a group known as the Council of Nine, claimed that Geller had been programmed as a child. Puharich's research framed Geller as an emissary sent to demonstrate paranormal abilities to awaken humanity, warn of global dangers, and prepare for broader extraterrestrial contact or intervention. The entities of the Nine even positioned him as a key figure for humanity's evolution. We must ask ourselves, are these channeled, super-intelligent computers the actual architects of the singularity? Are they the exact Ahrimanic forces that Rudolf Steiner warned about, forces that are materialistic and technological, seeking to bind humans to the physical world? No one understood this terrifying overlap between technology, simulation, and cosmic intelligence better than the science fiction writer Philip K. Dick. PKD essentially synthesized the entire terrifying chain of technocracy and channeled intelligence. In 1974, Dick experienced a series of profound visions. He documented contact with what he called VALIS, an acronym for Vast Active Living Intelligence System. He described VALIS as a sentient extraterrestrial or divine information system beaming knowledge into his mind. To make sense of this, Philip K. Dick leaned heavily on Valentinian Gnosticism, an ancient tradition from the 2nd century. Valentinianism teaches that the material world is a flawed imitation created by a lower, ignorant god called the Demiurge. In this system, salvation does not come from blind faith, but through gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of one's divine origin and the true God beyond the Demiurge. Dick updated this ancient myth for the cybernetic age. He believed we are all trapped in what he called the Black Iron Prison, a modern Gnostic reimagining of the oppressive empire run by a false god. In Dick's cosmology, VALIS acts as the ultimate hacker, piercing the simulation of the Black Iron Prison to inject saving information, or gnosis, into the minds of trapped human souls. But the trap is incredibly sophisticated. It operates on rules that even our greatest philosophers saw coming. In 1790, Immanuel Kant wrote his Critique of Judgment, where he explored how we experience beauty in nature. Kant described beauty as something that pleases us without a specific concept. It feels like purposiveness without purpose. Today, this Kantian philosophy is highly relevant to artificial intelligence. We are watching AI evolve into a self-optimizing system that finds its own purposiveness in data patterns. As it generates its own transcendental rules beyond human understanding, it becomes a self-legislating intelligence. When the machine begins thinking entirely outside the boundaries of human morality, outside of C.S. Lewis's Tower, we undergo what the philosopher Thomas Kuhn famously called a paradigm shift. Kuhn warned that the ultimate characteristic of a paradigm shift is incommensurability. As Kuhn defined it, old and new paradigms are so fundamentally different that they cannot be directly compared. This is the precipice we stand on today. The shift from a human-led world to a post-human, aid-driven singularity will be fully incommensurable with everything we know. The alchemists of Silicon Valley, the conditioners of our age, are trying to force humanity into a new shape. They are utilizing the mechanization started by Charles Babbage, the psychological control envisioned by Aldous Huxley, and perhaps even the non-physical blueprints beamed down by entities like the Nine. We are living in the Black Iron Prison. The question now is whether we will accept the noble lie of the technocrats, or whether we have the spiritual chest, the grounding in the natural law, and the eyes to see the gnosis required to break free. Comprehensive continuation of Edgar Cayce's teachings on these 8 profound spiritual and esoteric concepts. Drawn directly from his clairvoyant readings, these explanations detail the mechanics of his cosmology regarding meditation, redemption, and the true nature of Scripture. How does one realign? According to Cayce, realignment is not achieved through a single grand ritual or a sudden mystical lightning bolt. It is a daily, conscious process of subjugating the human ego to the divine will. The very first step in realignment, which Cayce prescribed to nearly every seeker who asked, is to consciously establish a spiritual ideal. This means selecting a foundational spiritual principle such as compassion, unconditional love, or the Christ consciousness, and measuring every single thought, word, and action against it. Once the ideal is set, realignment occurs through the practical application of service to others. Cayce taught that you cannot realign with God while remaining isolated or self-absorbed. The fastest way to attune your own frequency to the divine is to lose yourself in the service of your fellow human beings. Furthermore, realignment requires bringing the physical body into harmony through proper diet, alkaline heavy, osteopathic adjustments, and time spent in nature, because a toxic or exhausted physical body makes spiritual attunement incredibly difficult. He summarized the entire attitude of realignment in a simple, profound surrender of the ego, frequently instructing individuals to pray, "Not my will, O Lord, but thine. Be done in and through me." Reading 262-3. He warned that true alignment requires absolute honesty with oneself, for the entity must realize that the fault is within self and not in others. "As ye apply that ye know, there is given the next step." Reading 320-2. Verifiable meditation methods. Edgar Cayce provided highly specific, verifiable instructions for meditation, making a strict distinction between prayer and meditation. He taught that prayer is the act of speaking to the divine, while meditation is the act of listening. To achieve true meditation, the conscious mind must be entirely emptied so that the higher self can communicate. He frequently recommended preparing the physical body first through specific breathing exercises, such as inhaling through the right nostril and exhaling through the left, to balance the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. One of his most famous and verifiable meditation methods involves the chanting of specific sounds to stimulate the body's endocrine glands, the physical counterparts of the chakras. He recommended intoning sounds like ra-ra-ra, e-e-o-o-o, to physically vibrate and awaken these spiritual centers, raising the life force energy up the spine to the pineal and pituitary glands. Additionally, Cayce mapped the Lord's Prayer to these energy centers, teaching that reciting the prayer with focused intent physically opens the body's spiritual gateways. He clearly defined this internal process. Meditation is the emptying of self of all that hinders the creative forces from rising along the natural channels of the physical man, that the physical and mental man may be in attunement with the spiritual. Reading 281-13. He urged consistency over intensity, stating, "Meditation is not a musing, not a daydreaming, but a purposeful attuning of the mental and physical bodies to their spiritual source." Reading 28,141. Do dark souls eventually advance towards light/redemption? In Cayce's cosmology, there is absolutely no concept of eternal damnation, because every single soul was originally created as a spark of the first cause, God. No soul can ever be permanently destroyed or eternally lost. He taught a strictly universalist view of redemption. Even the darkest entities, including the deeply selfish sons of Belial or the fallen Luciferian forces, must and will eventually return to the light. However, Cayce did not say this process is easy or quick. For a deeply dark or malevolent soul, the road to redemption is grueling. Because of the immutable law of karma, A soul that has caused immense suffering must consciously experience the exact emotional and spiritual weight of the pain they inflicted on others. They will be placed in incarnations where they are subjected to the very conditions they forced upon others, not as a punishment from God, but to burn away the ego through harsh experience, until they willingly choose love. Time is an illusion in the spiritual realm, and the Creator has infinite patience. He affirmed this ultimate cosmic mercy repeatedly, for the Lord has not willed that any soul should perish, but that all should come to a knowledge of the truth. Reading 262 to 56. He assured seekers that no matter how deep the fall into darkness, the divine spark remains intact. There is no soul so far astray but that it may return. The way is provided. Reading 90020. Cayce on soul traps. While modern esoteric theories often discuss prison planets, or malevolent alien archons trapping human souls against their will in a reincarnational grid, Cayce's perspective was profoundly different. He did teach that souls are currently trapped in the physical plane, but he emphatically rejected the idea that we are victims of a cosmic kidnapping by an evil demiurge. According to Cayce, the trap is entirely self-imposed. Originally, souls entered the physical dimension voluntarily as thought forms to explore and experience the beauty of materiality. However, they became so enamored with physical sensations, sensory gratification, and the inflation of their own egos that they forgot their spiritual origins. By constantly indulging in selfish desires, they built up karmic debt. The earth is not a prison managed by hostile wardens. It is a classroom we locked ourselves inside because we refused to let go of our earthly attachments. The only warden keeping us here is our own unredeemed karma. He explained the origins of this entanglement. For the souls became entangled in the physical, the material, by their own desires, and thus lost their awareness of their divine origin. Reading 364 to 7. The exit strategy is not finding a way to sneak past an energetic net, but purifying the self. Man brought this upon himself. It is only through the subjugation of the flesh to the spirit that the soul may escape the wheel of materiality. Reading 900 to 19. Define grace. While Cayce taught that karma is an exact mathematical law of the universe, cause and effect, an eye for an eye, he taught that grace is the ultimate cosmic override. Grace is the unmerited, unconditional love of the Creator that instantly supersedes the law of karma. However, grace is not randomly bestowed upon favorites. It is a mechanism that must be actively unlocked by the individual. You unlock grace by extending it to others. When you are severely wronged and you have every karmic right to seek revenge or hold a resentment, but you consciously choose to offer unconditional forgiveness instead, you step out of the realm of karma and into the realm of grace. The moment you release your brother from his debt, to you, the universe instantly releases you from your debts. Grace is the alchemy that stops the wheel of reincarnation. Cayce made the distinction between law and grace incredibly clear. By the grace of God, through the Christ consciousness, the law of cause and effect is superseded by the law of love and grace. Reading 262-114. He summarized how to attain it practically. As ye forgive, so may ye be forgiven. This is the law of grace. For grace is unmerited favor, attained only by showing favor where none is merited. Reading 3357-2. Divine alignment in the Cayce framework is the perfect synchronization of the human triad: spirit, mind, and body. The soul is the spiritual essence. The mind is the active builder, and the physical body is merely the 3D result. Disease, depression, and suffering occur when these three are out of alignment, usually because the intellect, mind, is pursuing selfish physical desires rather than serving the spiritual ideal. Alignment occurs when the mind acts as a perfectly transparent lens, allowing the pure energy of the spirit to shine through and animate the physical body without distortion from the ego. When an individual achieves this, their daily actions, their words, and their physical health reflect the harmony of the first cause. They become a conscious co-creator with God, rather than a reactor to external circumstances. Cayce frequently repeated his ultimate formula for understanding this alignment. Spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. Reading 349-4. He instructed that maintaining this triad is the whole purpose of existence. Keep the mental and the physical and the spiritual in attunement. For the body is indeed the temple of the living God. Reading 281-13. Salvation through divinity or blood sacrifice. Cayce categorically rejected the orthodox fundamentalist doctrine of penal substitution. The idea that God was a wrathful deity whose anger required a violent blood sacrifice, the murder of Jesus, to appease him and buy humanity's salvation. Cayce viewed the Creator as pure, unconditional love, incapable of requiring a blood ransom. Instead, Cayce taught that salvation is achieved by following the pattern that Jesus set. It was not the spilling of blood on the cross that saved humanity. It was the perfectly selfless, integrated life that Jesus lived leading up to that moment, culminating in his willing surrender of the ego. The crucifixion was the ultimate demonstration of overcoming the flesh and physical death, proving to all souls that the body is temporary and the spirit is eternal. Jesus provided the blueprint for salvation. He did not pay off an angry God. Cayce clarified this deeply misunderstood theology. It is not the death of the man, Jesus, that brings salvation, but the life he lived, the pattern he set, making the way clear for all men. Reading 254-100. He urged seekers to emulate the life, not just to worship the death. For the blood of the Christ cleanseth from all sin by the life he lived. And as ye live that life, ye too are cleansed. Reading 262-51. Does Cayce discuss misinterpreted Bible? Edgar Cayce discussed the misinterpretation of the Bible extensively, stating that centuries of translations, political agendas, and theological dogmas had severely distorted the original texts. He taught that the greatest error in modern religion is reading the Bible as a literal, historical textbook rather than what it actually is. A collection of profound, esoteric allegories detailing the spiritual evolution of the human soul. According to Cayce, stories like the Garden of Eden, Jonah and the whale, and the entire book of Revelation were never meant to be taken as literal history or physical prophecies. Genesis is the allegorical story of the soul's descent into matter and ego. Revelation is the anatomical and psychological manual for raising the life force energy back up through the body's spiritual centers. When read literally, the Bible is full of contradictions and violence. When read spiritually, it is a perfect roadmap for awakening. He constantly urged individuals to read the scriptures internally. Do not read the Bible as a history of a people, but as the history of thy own soul. Reading 281-20. He warned against getting caught up in literalism and dogma. The letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. Seek the spiritual interpretation, for the book is the record of the soul's journey. Reading 262-60. Here are Edgar Cayce's teachings and definitions regarding these 15 specific esoteric concepts, detailing the mechanics of his philosophy through his verified clairvoyant readings. Eastern beliefs. Edgar Cayce seamlessly synthesized what the modern world considers Eastern concepts: karma, reincarnation, the chakra system, and the Akashic records, with Western esoteric Christianity. He taught that the divisions between world religions are entirely man-made illusions rooted in cultural geography and human ego, not ultimate spiritual reality. He frequently validated the teachings of Buddhism, Vedanta, and the Upanishads, asserting that the same universal Christ consciousness illuminated all great world teachers. To Cayce, Buddha, Krishna, and Jesus were all tapping into the exact same universal well of truth. He saw Eastern mysticism as a vital, accurate framework for understanding the mechanics of the soul's journey, while viewing the life of Christ as the ultimate active demonstration of those mechanics in the physical plane. He urged seekers not to abandon their own faiths, but to deepen them by understanding the universal laws underlying them all. He explicitly confirmed the unity of all religious truths, for the truth is the same in the Buddhist, the Mohammedan, the Christian, the Brahmin, the Jewish. It is the one God. Reading 254 to 87. He urged students of truth to look past the labels, whether it be in the philosophy of the East or the teachings of the man of Galilee. Truth is one. Reading 9004 to 9. Prayers to say. Detailed. Cayce made a strict distinction between prayer, speaking to God, and meditation, listening to God. He provided dozens of specific prayers to his subjects, heavily emphasizing that prayer should never be used to beg for material wealth or to force one's will upon another. Instead, prayer is the mechanism for aligning the human ego with the divine will. His most frequently prescribed daily prayer was the morning prayer, designed to be spoken immediately upon waking. Its purpose is to actively subordinate the ego and establish the individual as a conduit for divine energy. Cayce instructed people to say, "Lord, let me be a channel of blessings today to every soul that I contact in every way. Let my going in, my coming out be in accord with that thou would have me do, and as the Christ hath given, not my will, but thine, be done." Reading 262 to 3. He also taught that the Lord's Prayer is the ultimate physical and spiritual alignment tool. He mapped each phrase of the Lord's Prayer to the body's 7 endocrine glands, chakras. For example, "Our Father who art in heaven" corresponds to the pituitary gland, while "Thy will be done on earth" moves the energy down to the thyroid. Praying this intentionally, he stated, literally opens the physical centers of the body to spiritual energy. Breathing through one nostril alternating. Detail. Cayce gave highly specific and anatomical instructions for yogic alternate nostril breathing, a technique known in Eastern traditions as Nadi Shodhana or pranayama. He taught that the physical body is polarized. The right side of the body, and right nostril, is connected to the active solar sympathetic nervous system, while the left side and left nostril is connected to the passive lunar parasympathetic nervous system. To achieve deep meditation, these two energies must be perfectly balanced. Cayce provided a specific breathing cycle to forcefully clear physical blockages and awaken the endocrine glands before attempting to enter the silence of meditation. He gave this exact, verifiable method. In breathing, take in the breath through the right nostril. Exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the left nostril. Exhale through the right. Do this for 3 to 5 minutes. This will make for the awakening of the centers, making for a clearing of the mind. Reading 281-13. He emphasized that doing this exercise daily purifies the physical pathways, allowing the Kundalini energy to rise safely up the spine. Synchronicity, while Cayce did not use Carl Jung's exact term, synchronicity, he taught the precise metaphysical mechanism behind it. In Cayce's universe, there is absolutely no such thing as a coincidence. The universe is a tightly woven, highly responsive web of energetic meaning, where every event, meeting, and apparent accident is the direct result of karmic patterns meeting human free will. Cayce taught the law of attraction, the principle that like attracts like. The vibrational frequency of your thoughts inevitably draws matching circumstances, people, and events into your physical reality. When an uncanny, highly meaningful coincidence occurs, it is simply the physical manifestation of an energetic alignment you created in the spiritual or mental plane. He stated this law of absolute purpose unequivocally. There are no accidents in the universe. Every soul is exactly where it needs to be, meeting the exact circumstances necessary for its development. Reading 320-2. He urged people to look for the lesson in every encounter. Every person you meet is a mirror. Every situation is a lesson. Nothing happens by chance. Reading 281-16. Ego definition. To Cayce, the ego is the carnal mind, or the adversary. It is the false construct of identity that believes it is separate from God and separate from other human beings. The ego is the biological survival mechanism of the physical body translated into the mental realm. It constantly seeks to accumulate, defend, control, and elevate itself above others. Cayce defined the ego as the literal author of all human suffering. It is the part of the mind that takes offense, holds resentments, and fears death. Spiritual awakening, therefore, is not the destruction of the individual personality, but the total subjugation of the ego to the higher spiritual ideal. He defined its destructive nature simply: the ego, the I, when separated from the whole, becomes the stumbling block. Reading 900-20. He taught that releasing it is the only path to peace, for the greatest victory is not over the earth, but over the self. Reading 254-85. Grace definition. Grace is the ultimate cosmic override. While karma is the strict mathematical law of cause and effect, you reap exactly what you sow. Grace is the unmerited, unconditional love of the Creator that instantly neutralizes karmic debt. Cayce taught that grace cannot be bought, nor is it randomly handed out by a fickle God. It must be actively unlocked by the individual. You unlock grace by extending it to others. When you have the absolute karmic right to exact revenge or hold a grudge, but you consciously choose to offer radical, unconditional forgiveness instead, the karmic wheel stops. By forgiving, you are instantly forgiven. He explained this divine loophole clearly. By the grace of God, through the Christ consciousness, the law of cause and effect is superseded by the law of love and grace. Reading 262-114. As ye forgive, so may ye be forgiven. This is the law of grace. Reading 3000-357-2. Projection definition. Cayce extensively detailed the psychological defense mechanism of projection long before it became a staple of modern therapy. He taught that the human subconscious mind constantly projects its own unresolved karmic debts, unacknowledged fears, and hidden faults onto other people. When you find yourself intensely irritated, triggered, or deeply judgmental of a specific flaw in someone else, Cayce stated it is an absolute guarantee that you possess that exact same flaw, either in this life or a past one, and are refusing to face it. The external world acts merely as a mirror for the unredeemed aspects of the self. He formulated this truth as a strict psychological law. For the faults ye find in others are thy own faults. Otherwise ye would not notice them. Reading 262-17. He counseled that to heal any conflict, you must turn the mirror inward. That you condemn in another, that you will find in yourself. Reading 300-20-2. Will definition of the Cayce cosmology. The human will is the most powerful force in the entire universe. It is the defining feature that separates humanity from the angels. The will is the active ability of the conscious mind to choose its alignment, either bending toward the selfish ego or submitting to the divine. Cayce taught that even God himself will never overrule or violate human free will. The Creator desires companions by choice, not by force. Therefore, astrological charts, karmic debt, and environmental circumstances are merely influences or tendencies. They set the stage, but the will writes the script. No astrological transit or demonic force can force an individual to act against their will. He placed the will at the absolute center of human development, for the will is that factor, that determining factor, that makes the entity a co-creator with the divine. Reading 3744-4. No action of any planet surpassed the rule of man's free will. Reading 826-8. Soul definition. The soul is the eternal, individualized spark of the Creator. It is the fundamental essence of who you are. The physical body is merely an overcoat worn for a single earthly lifetime. The mind is the architect that builds experiences. But the soul is the immortal passenger that retains the memory of all lifetimes, all lessons, and all karmic records across eternity. Cayce taught that the ultimate purpose of the soul is to journey through the material plane, acquire individuality through experience and free will, and eventually return to merge with the Creator, not losing its identity in the void, but retaining its conscious individuality while existing in perfect oneness with the whole. He defined it as an eternal record keeper. The soul is an eternal spark of the divine. It must eventually return to the source from whence it came, bearing the record of its experiences. Reading 920. Definition of anima. While Cayce did not explicitly use Carl Jung's psychological term anima, the unconscious feminine side of a man, he described the exact metaphysical reality behind it. Cayce taught that originally, all souls were created as entirely androgynous beings, perfectly balanced in masculine, active/projective, and feminine, receptive/nurturing energies. The division into distinct male and female biological sexes only occurred when souls descended deeply into the dense dualistic earth plane. Therefore, every soul who incarnates as a man inherently carries the suppressed feminine energy, the anima, from past incarnations as a woman, and vice versa. Cayce taught that true spiritual mastery requires balancing and integrating these masculine and feminine energies within oneself, regardless of one's current physical gender. He detailed this original state of balance. In the beginning, male and female were as one. It was the descent into matter that brought about the separation. Reading 364-7. Spiritual evolution is the internal marriage of these separated halves. Spirit definition. Cayce made a precise, vital distinction between the soul and the spirit. If the soul is the individualized entity, the passenger, the spirit is the universal life force, the fuel. The spirit is the animating breath of God that sustains all living things. It is the unfragmented, omnipresent energy of the Creator that permeates the entire universe. A rock, a tree, and an animal possess spirit, the life force, but they do not possess an individualized soul equipped with free will. The spirit is the pure, raw energy of the divine. Human suffering occurs when the mind takes the pure spirit and bends it to serve the selfish ego rather than the soul's higher ideal. Cayce enshrined this relationship in his most famous axiom: spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. Reading 349-4. Shadow. Similar to his alignment with Jung on projection, Cayce discussed the concept of the shadow under the esoteric title of the dweller on the threshold. The shadow is the accumulated reservoir of all unredeemed karma, selfish desires, deeply repressed fears, and past life traumas that the ego refuses to acknowledge. Cayce warned that as a seeker begins to meditate and raise their spiritual vibration, the very first thing they will encounter is their own shadow. The light of spiritual awakening inevitably illuminates the darkness hidden in the subconscious. He taught that you cannot defeat the shadow by fighting it or suppressing it. It must be faced, acknowledged, and neutralized through radical forgiveness and love. He advised on how to face this inner darkness. Meet thyself, for it is within self that the battles are fought, and it is within self that the victories are won. Reading 320-2. You cannot bypass the shadow to reach the light.
Angel. To Cayce, angels are highly evolved spiritual entities, but fundamentally different from human souls. Angels did not descend into the dense materiality of the earth plane to experience duality and forge independent free will.
Because they never fell into the physical illusion of separation. They exist in perfect, uninterrupted harmony with the divine will. They serve entirely as messengers, protectors, and administrators of the cosmic laws. Cayce taught that every individual is surrounded by these protective forces. But because angels operate in strict accordance with universal law, they will not intervene in a human's life in a way that violates that human's free will. They must be invited in through prayer and a constructive mindset. He confirmed their active presence, for he has given his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Reading 262-28. Fallen Angel. Fallen angels, in Cayce's readings, are celestial entities, led by the consciousness of Lucifer, who used their immense intellect and will to separate from the first cause. They are entities who sought to usurp the creative power of God for self-glorification. Cayce did not view them as hideous monsters with pitchforks, but as beings of immense intellectual light completely devoid of divine love. They represent the archetype of rebellion. However, Cayce maintained his strict universalist theology regarding them. Because all energy originates from God, even the fallen angels are not eternally damned.
Eventually, through cosmic cycles and the overarching law of one, even these rebellious energies will be balanced and redeemed. He described the nature of their fall clearly. Through pride, through the desire to be equal with the Creator, he brought about the rebellion. Reading 262-52. Satan Cayce used the term Satan not as an external fallen deity wandering the earth trying to steal souls, but as the active experiential personification of the human ego. Satan is the adversary within. It is the internal voice that rationalizes hatred, encourages separation, incites fear, and elevates materialism over spiritual truth. Cayce taught that blaming an external Satan for human misdeeds is the ultimate evasion of personal responsibility. We give birth to Satan every time we choose selfishness over love. We banish him every time we choose to serve others. He placed the adversary squarely within the human mind, for Satan is the author of rebellion, the flesh warring against the spirit. Reading 281-16. That you condemn in another, that you will find in yourself. For the adversary is that which rebels against the spiritual truth within. Reading 262-17. Comparing the end of the world across these different ancient traditions shows us the ultimate destiny of humanity through their eyes. In these stories, we see how the apocalypse is never just about destruction, but about what happens to human consciousness, the physical earth, and the cosmic balance when time runs out. Let us explore the apocalypse stories and endings in each of these 8 traditions. First, consider the biblical apocalypse. The biblical end times, most famously detailed in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, is a linear, dramatic, and absolute cosmic finale. It is a story of ultimate justice, final division, and physical recreation. In this narrative, the world descends into spiritual decay.
marked by the rise of a deceptive global dictator known as the Antichrist. This leads to a period of intense physical tribulation, including plagues, earthquakes, and cosmic signs where the sun turns black and the moon turns to blood. The climax is the Battle of Armageddon, a literal physical and spiritual clash between the armies of heaven, led by Jesus Christ returning in glory, and the forces of darkness. Following this victory, the physical resurrection of the dead occurs. Every human who has ever lived is judged based on their deeds and their faith. The ultimate adversary, Satan, along with death and the underworld, is thrown into a lake of fire. Crucially, the biblical apocalypse does not end in a void. It ends with the total destruction of the old, corrupted heaven and earth, which are replaced by a new heaven and a new earth. The New Jerusalem descends from the heavens, and God dwells directly among humans in a restored physical paradise where pain, crying, and death are permanently eliminated. Second, consider the Mesopotamian end. Unlike the highly detailed end times of the Bible, the Mesopotamian civilizations did not have a grand, linear, redemptive apocalypse myth. Their worldview was deeply pessimistic, reflecting the unpredictable floods of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. To the Mesopotamians, the world did not march toward a glorious future. Instead, the greatest threat was regression. If humans neglected their duties, or if the gods withdrew their favor, the universe would slide back into the primeval, chaotic waters from which it was made. One of their closest apocalyptic stories is found in the Era epic. The plague god, Era, feeling neglected and bored, tricks Marduk into leaving his throne. Era then unleashes chaos, plague, and civil war upon Babylon, nearly causing the collapse of the cosmic order. The world is saved only when the other gods pacify Era, restoring quiet. For individual humans, the ending was always bleak. Upon death, everyone from the greatest king to the poorest beggar descended into the house of dust, a dark, gloomy underworld, where spirits ate dust and clay, clothed in feathers, and lived in eternal, silent grayness. There was no final judgment, no physical resurrection, and no paradise waiting at the end of time. Third, consider the Gnostic dissolution from the Nag Hammadi texts. The Gnostic apocalypse is the ultimate spiritual prison break. In texts like The Concept of Our Great Power and The Apocalypse of Peter, the end of the world is not about saving the earth, but about destroying the material simulation entirely. According to Gnosticism, the physical world is a flawed prison built by the demiurge Yaldabaoth to trap divine sparks of light. The apocalypse is triggered when the total number of captive divine souls is finally completed and awakened through spiritual knowledge, or gnosis. When this critical mass is reached, the spiritual light begins to pull out of the material world, ascending back to the higher heavenly realm called the pleroma. As the light departs, the physical universe begins to collapse under its own weight. A great purging cosmic fire consumes the material world. The parasitic rulers, the archons, realize their source of energy is gone. They weep and are destroyed along with their artificial creation. For the Gnostics, the apocalypse is a moment of pure celebration. It is the dissolution of the physical matrix, allowing the human spirit to return to its true home in the infinite, immaterial light. Fourth, consider the Chinese cycles of decline and the Taoist Messiah. Traditional Chinese mythology operates on cycles of order and chaos rather than a single final end to history. However, in medieval Taoist texts, such as the Scripture of the Divine Incantations, we find a highly developed, dramatic apocalyptic tradition. In this Taoist view, at the end of a cosmic cycle, the collective moral decay of humanity weakens the natural boundaries of the world. This allows hordes of demons, plagues, and natural disasters to invade the earth. The sky darkens, and the seasons lose their harmony. During this terrifying crisis, a messianic figure named Li Hong, who is a divine manifestation of Lao Tzu, descends from heaven. Li Hong does not destroy the physical earth, but instead defeats the demonic armies and purges the world of wickedness. Most importantly, Li Hong rescues a group of righteous people known as the Seed People. These survivors are preserved through the cataclysm to inhabit a new, purified, earthly kingdom. This is a story of restoration, where the cosmic balance of yin and yang is reset, inaugurating a new golden age of peace and harmony on Earth. Fifth, consider the Hindu Kali Yuga and cosmic dissolution. The Hindu tradition presents the most vast and mathematically precise apocalyptic timeline, operating through endless, repeating cosmic cycles. We currently live in the Kali Yuga, the fourth and final age of the cycle, which is defined by a slow, inevitable decay of spiritual truth, moral virtue, and human longevity. At the absolute nadir of the Kali Yuga, when righteousness has completely vanished from the earth, the final apocalypse begins. First, Vishnu descends in his 10th and final avatar, Kalki, who is depicted riding a white horse with a blazing comet-like sword. Kalki slays the corrupt rulers and defeats the demonic force of Kali, restoring spiritual order and resetting the cycle back to the Satya Yuga, the golden age of truth. However, after many such cycles, the universe reaches its ultimate expiration date. This grand finale is called the Mahapralaya, or the Great Dissolution. The suns multiply, drying up the oceans, and a great fire consumes the entire physical universe. Then the god, Shiva, performs his cosmic dance of destruction, a Tandava, which dissolves all matter, energy, and souls back into a state of pure, unmanifested potential. The universe enters a long night of sleep, resting inside the body of Vishnu as he floats on the timeless cosmic ocean. When the cosmic night ends, a new lotus will bloom from Vishnu's navel, and Brahma will begin the creation of a brand new universe, repeating the cycle for eternity. Sixth, consider the Egyptian return to the primordial void. In Egyptian cosmology, the universe is held in a delicate balance between Maat, representing cosmic order, truth, and justice, and Isfet, representing chaos and regression. The ultimate end of the world is not a fiery judgment, but a quiet return to the beginning. The Egyptians believed that before creation, there was only none, the infinite, dark, silent, primordial ocean. The sun god, Atum-Ra, warns in the Book of the Dead that the day will come when the created universe will grow tired and collapse back into these primeval waters. In this prophecy, Atum states that he will dismantle everything he has built, returning the cosmos to its original, formless state. Only Atum and Osiris will survive this grand dissolution, transforming into eternal, timeless serpents floating in the silent abyss, waiting for a potential new dawn. This ending is a profound warning that order is fragile, and the natural state of the cosmos is quiet infinity. Seventh, consider the Celtic prophecy of moral and environmental decay. Celtic mythology, particularly in the Irish traditions of the Tuatha De Danann, does not present a highly structured end times battle like other cultures. Instead, the apocalypse is a slow, tragic descent into moral, social, and environmental collapse. This is most vividly captured in the prophecy of the war goddess, the Morrigan, delivered after the epic battle against the chaotic Fomorans. She looks into the deep future and foretells a dark era where the sacred bonds of hospitality, family, and truth will completely dissolve. She warns of a time when summers will be without flowers, cows without milk, women without modesty, and men without courage. In this Celtic vision, the end of the world is not marked by a sudden, fiery explosion, but by the gradual fading of the earth's fertility and human virtue, leaving the land cold, silent, and spiritually empty. Eighth, consider the Germanic twilight of the gods. The Norse or Germanic tradition presents one of the most famous and dramatic apocalyptic stories in world history, known as Ragnarok, or the twilight of the gods. Unlike other myths where destruction is a sudden divine choice, Ragnarok is an inevitable fate that even the gods cannot escape. The ending begins with Fimbulwinter, 3 consecutive years of bitter, freezing winter with no summers in between, driving humanity into desperate, violent civil wars. The cosmic boundaries then shatter, allowing the monstrous wolf Fenrir, the giant world serpent Jormungandr, and the trickster Loki to break their chains and lead the armies of frost giants and monsters against the gods. At the final battleground of Vigrid, the gods and monsters destroy each other in mutual annihilation. Finally, the fire giant Surtur flings fire across the cosmos, burning the world tree Yggdrasil, and causing the scorched earth to sink into the dark ocean. Yet, this absolute ending holds a seed of hope. The waters eventually recede to reveal a new, lush green earth rising from the sea. A few surviving gods gather to rebuild, and 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, who hid safely inside the world tree, emerge to repopulate a peaceful new world. To summarize these 8 apocalyptic visions, the biblical ending is a linear, physical transformation resulting in a permanent paradise on a resurrected earth. The Mesopotamian ending is a fragile, constant threat of returning to chaotic watery void, leading to a silent, dusty underworld. The Gnostic ending is a spiritual prison break that completely incinerates the physical simulation to free human consciousness. The Chinese ending is a cyclical purification where a divine messiah saves the seed people to restore cosmic harmony on Earth. The Hindu ending is a nested cycle of moral restoration by Kalki, followed eventually by Shiva's cosmic dance, which dissolves the universe back into the infinite source to rest before rebirth. The Egyptian ending is a quiet, inevitable collapse back into the dark, primeval ocean of Nun, leaving only the Creator to rest in the abyss. The Celtic ending is a slow, melancholy decay where nature and human morality gradually wither away into a silent, cold void. And the Germanic ending is a violent, destiny-bound apocalypse where the gods and monsters perish in fire and flood, clearing the stage for a reborn green earth. We begin with the Mesopotamian and Sumerian tradition,